or chocolate or whatever.
It's a grape, Esther. It is a grape, Esther. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Living Longer Health Talk with Dr. Esther Winterfeldt. We are excited to have her on board doing these virtual Zoom calls with us. We want to thank you, Esther, so much for taking time while you are in self-quarantine to make sure that we all still have a healthy presentation given to us, especially during this time when we all really need to stay healthy. So I'm going to make it a full screen, and I'm going to mute everybody at this point, and then once Esther's done, I will unmute everybody. Does anybody have any questions before we start? No? Okay. And I'll be watching for people to come on, Esther, and at this point, I'm going to mute all except for Esther, and I'll come back and unmute you, Esther. Okay, Esther, you are on. Welcome.
All right. Good to hear everybody and to see somebody and see quite a few of you. So that's good. I said it's good to have a reason to get up and comb your hair and put on your face a little bit too. So maybe this is a good thing we plan it as we do. So what I thought I'd talk about today is some information that I've collected from various sources. It's really not all of it is not completely new information, but it's not, that's not all new information. It's the kinds of studies that have been published in either journals or papers in one way or another that have added some new information to what we may have had and talked about, covered before, or has added to some of that. Or some completely new things too. And so it's not a collection of facts, information along one theme. It's a variety of things, as you'll see as we go along. So I thought I'd start out with talking a little bit about the microbiome. The microbiome, referring to the numbers, the small organisms that live in us. The biome meaning the human body, micro, of course, referring to small. There are, in fact, thousands, maybe trillions. Different sources say different amounts because no one knows for sure. And these are bacteria and other kinds of microbes that live in us. They reside mostly in the intestinal tract, but in other places throughout the body as well. Even in the mouth, in the other internal organs and other places. It's said that there may be as many as 10,000 different varieties of bacteria and these small organisms, which include viruses and other kinds, that actually reside in us, and that each of us is unique in our makeup of which ones that we have in our particular intestines and the rest of the body too. They say that about 1/3 of our weight, well, maybe not 1/3. What did I find out about that? It simply says a big part of our overall weight. So I don't know how many pounds we would say we are carrying around that are made up of bacteria, but apparently it's a pretty large amount too. Why are they in our body, in our intestinal tract? It's because they perform a number of functions for us, mostly good functions too. They help us to extract energy from food, for one thing. And of course, we want that to happen naturally too. They also help to handle and secrete and even produce a vitamin, one vitamin K, one vitamin, but they also help to metabolize and secrete vitamin B12. B12 being one of those vitamins that's really critical for older people because we lose the capacity to produce it. And it also boosts our immunity. the microbiome. So they do perform a number of functions. The time that they would turn bad would be if it were viruses that took hold, or for some reason bad types of bacteria that in effect got a foothold, and from that made us sick in some way. But we do know that our genes and even our dietary habits, our environment, medications, stress, all of these things are affected by the number of bacteria and other organisms that make up our microbiome. Now, probiotics are one of the types of substances that help to, in effect, help make the microbiome function for us. And I'm going to say a little bit more about probiotics a little bit further along, but I'll go on to our next topic, which I wanted to say a little bit about our genes. Our genes. Now, our genes, of course, again, are completely unique to us. They are established in both plants and humans, no question about that. In humans, we know that we have sequences of genes that can lead to specific kinds of diseases, because the research now can help to identify particular genes associated with particular disease conditions. There is another set of conditions that can happen when people are either deficient in a particular gene or it's an abnormal gene. And then it could be a metabolic type of a disease that doesn't come under quite the same category as a disease caused directly by a bacteria or so. And the only way they can be cured, that kind of a disease can be cured, would be to either replace the gene or to, in some way, change either dietary habits or medications in a way that avoids that particular, what should I say, but that particular result from the lack of that particular gene too. So there are screening tests for various kinds of diseases as well too. Again, we can change genes. It's known that it's possible to change lifestyle functions, things that we do that impact our overall health and disease resistance, I guess we'd be able to say. We think that one of these days, maybe not real soon, but within a few years, we might be able to plan our diets individually according to our own gene makeup, because particular genes can be identified that, again, are associated with particular nutrients. And so people think that maybe that can be a possibility as time goes on. So we will see that. But genes do produce a large number of proteins. In fact, that's the work that they do, is produce proteins. And we have thousands of different kinds of proteins in our body. Not all of them have ever even been identified, I read. And they do an awful lot of the body's work too. So, I wanted to say a little bit about fat cells, fat in the body. Fat cells don't just sit there and accumulate. They're active. They're active cells. They're actually doing two things. Very interesting to realize that there are at least two kinds of hormones that influence whether or not we deposit fat. Maybe you've heard of leptin, L-E-P-T-I-N, leptin. Leptin is a hormone that is produced by fat cells. What it does is acts to suppress our appetite. And because of that, it helps to burn fat. it does help to burn fat, suppresses appetite. But acting in opposition to that leptin is another hormone called ghrelin, G-H-R-E-L-I-N, ghrelin. And that one does exactly the opposite. It acts on the hypothalamus in the brain to stimulate hunger and feeding. It makes us hungry, makes us want to eat something, therefore leads to the production and the growth of fat cells. So we have two hormones that are produced by fat cells that do two opposite things. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Now, insulin also, of course, as a hormone, also does some synthesis, not only of production of fat, but also storage of fat too. So we have another hormone that gets into the mix as well. I don't know if you might have heard of brown fat. Within several years ago, researchers discovered that we had two kinds of fat in the body. The usual kinds of white fat that we would normally see, like on meat, which apparently is pretty much what our own fat looks like. And then also we have a smaller amount of what's called brown fat in the body, and it seems to be a much more active kind of fat. I once heard a lecture, it's been several years ago now, by a physician who had been doing a lot of research on brown fat in babies. And they even can discover where in the body brown fat is produced. But they find it's much, much more active than regular fat. So apparently we have some of that too, but we don't hear about that. And we don't know for sure what its particular functions are, except that we know it's a very active kind. So you might have heard about the set point theory in regard to fat deposits. The set point theory is a belief that we tend to, or our body tends to set a point at which our weight is determined to stay. That is, the body becomes used to a certain weight, and it works pretty hard to try to stay at that weight, which is, of course, one reason why it's not really easy to lose fat. It's pretty difficult, actually. It takes effort. It takes a lot of effort to do that too, and it takes effort to gain fat as well too, to overcome this so-called set point. I don't know whether science and researchers have settled on believing that set point is something that is truly is the main factor that determines our total amount of fat in the body, but we keep hearing that theory all the time too. So we know that there are toxins that have an effect on the amount of fat that accumulates in the body as well. Toxins can be deposited in fat, for one thing, and they can overload the body's detoxification processes. That is, the body's ability to get rid of those toxins, and they become deposited there. And then that affects our immunity and certainly causes some reaction to whatever the buildup of toxins might be. So that's not a good thing to see too. There are some regulatory factors that we know function in the body. There are brain neurotransmitters that have to do with fat deposit and fat loss, if and when. There are other hormones in the intestinal tract itself too. In fact, there are about 22 of those kind of hormones. So we have a lot of things that are regulating or handling the way that body reacts to and handles fat. So I just thought that were some interesting things about what we know about it, about fat and fat deposit in the body, but also why it's something that becomes an obsession almost with a lot of people. And in fact, obesity, as we now know, is a is not only a problem in this country, but becoming one in other parts of the world as well, too. Now, questions come up at times about, what about acid-base balance in the body? So I thought I'd say a little something about that. The acid and base balance in the body is regulated by the lungs and the kidneys. The intent is that most of our internal fluids are slightly alkaline. If you're familiar with the pH value, which is the chemical term for determining the amount of acid or base or alkaline substance, which are bases in the body, it's set at 7.3 to 7.4. 7.0 is neutral, neither acid, neither base. So we're saying that this is slightly on the base side, that most of our body fluids are maintained too. Now, foods themselves are either acid or basic, or become acid or basic once they're eaten. And it's because of the contents of whatever is there too. For instance, acid type foods that turn acid in the digestive system, are grains, meats, and dairy products, animal products, and grains. The foods that turn basic, more alkaline in the body, are fruits and vegetables. So here we go back to good old eating our fruits and vegetables to help our acid-base balance in the body and to help maintain it on the slightly basic side too. The reason why it's better to show a tendency towards a basic milieu, I guess we would say, is that high acidity can lead to some pretty adverse effects, like bone loss and broken bones, and osteoporosis, which of course is what we're referring to when talking about bone loss. So high acidity can affect the bones. So many times, if you read articles about the effects of acid-base balance in the body, alkaline diets are the ones that are promoted. Now, it doesn't mean we have to go overboard and avoid any foods that become acid in the body. We wouldn't dare do that, because we still want to have a balanced, well-rounded kind of a dietary intake. But it's good to just to realize that, in fact, we can have some influence on the acid-base balance too. Now, another interesting thing that I keep reading about nowadays is the circadian rhythm in our bodies. We are all on a particular circadian rhythm. That means that we have a built-in clock, and that built-in clock guides us 24 hours a day. It's a cycle of activities that happen too, and our body becomes used to this, becomes attenuated to it, and it tends to govern our activities, therefore, too. It's run by, we're told, light and dark cycles, light, dark circles. So it has to do with whatever we're doing during the day in regard to activities, eating, etc., and our sleep cycle at night as well, too. So if there is a disruption for some reason in sleep and wake time and in mealtime patterns, then we may get into a disconnect to this circadian rhythm. And apparently we don't get a disease, but we're out of sorts, we're out of sync. And I suppose that we have ways of telling that. If we feel like things aren't going like they should, that we've skipped events, or we've skipped regular times that we do things, which upsets our routines. Sometimes that causes stress and some of the other kinds of disruptions like that too. They say that there are more heart attacks, strokes, and sudden cardiac deaths that occur in the early morning hours. Isn't that interesting? And apparently that has to do with the fact that there are substances, to get my next little thing here, that cause the blood to clot easier for some reason in the morning hours. Possibly, I suppose, because we've been so inactive for either 7 or maybe 8 hours, or sometimes even more. And so it's been discovered that adverse things can happen too. It also, I also read a real recent article that said that more of these things happen on Monday mornings, rather than any other day of the week. And that's because weekends are different in regard to what we do, in regard to our eating, our meal plans, and also our sleep patterns. I don't know if everyone agrees to that or not, but weekends, for us right now, weekends are not much different from any other weekday. Well, let's say that. But ordinarily, in a person's who's in a work situation, the weekend is different. Their routine is different, and so apparently that has some effect again on our physical well-being. So it's said that eating in the early half of the day is better for us. Eating in the early half of the day. That if we need to lose weight, that can happen in a better way and can better control blood sugar. So I also wanted to point out, I have a book that talks about this. Let me show it to you. I hope I don't upset things here too much. Can you see? Does it show?
Over just a second. Can you back it up just a little bit, Esther, so we can see a little bit better? Yeah, right there. That's perfect.
What to eat when? This is by a couple of MDs, and they're talking about exactly this type of thing, that we can improve our total health if we space our eating, so that eating more earlier in the day. Oh, Lola, I'm sorry I'm having a time here. Lola's going to help us now too. They make a number of statements throughout this book that I don't 100% agree with. There are two physicians. Physicians don't get much nutrition training, but they make a point by saying that, in fact, that the body's metabolism apparently does improve when we time the eating. I want to have help from Lola, my cat, right now. Sorry about that. Okay. Lola, move on. All right. Did you know that the 3 most popular vegetables among everybody, among the population in this country. Would you like to guess what they are? White potatoes, tomatoes, and lettuce. And in fact, those three crops account for a huge percentage of the vegetables that people eat. Potatoes being one of the most eaten. And potatoes, of course, are eaten in quite a number of different forms. So I guess that stands to reason. Potato chips and French fries are the two main ways that potatoes are eaten in this country. And so the intake is pretty tremendous. Okay, thought I'd say a little bit about gluten. We've talked about gluten before in at least one of the other sessions earlier. And gluten is that part comes from it's a particular protein type found in wheat, rye, and barley that causes problems for some people. The people who have what's termed celiac disease, which of course is an intestinal tract disease, malabsorption that takes place, and difficulty with handling of these particular food items, are the ones that are at fault too. It's said that about 1% of people worldwide have celiac disease, and that about 6% have what's termed gluten sensitivity. So those are the two conditions for which gluten needs to be restricted in a person's dietary intake. 1/3 of Americans, however, have attempted to eliminate gluten from their dietary intake. People really have gotten this message and have taken it to heart. And yet there isn't a whole lot of scientific assurance that they're doing anything for themselves, except to perhaps avoiding a couple of good food items. Wheat flour itself is enriched with vitamins and minerals, but any type of gluten products are not enriched with vitamins and minerals, which gives another reason to consider to whether or not a person really wants to eat more of the gluten-free products, because there are a number of them on the market, of course, now that are made from grain products other than the wheat, rye, and barley, of course, too. So about sugar, to say a little bit more about sugar. Excess sugar, it's said, releases dopamine in the body. Dopamine is one of those hormones that acts like cocaine, they say. Excess sugar acts like dopamine. This means that it's really pepping up our metabolism, no question about that. And apparently is the reason why young people, children especially, many times become hyperactive, and many times it's at least thought that it's due to excess sugar. Sugar, of course, is one of those innate tastes. People like sugar. People crave sugar sometimes. That is, we're not real sure whether people crave sugar or become addicted to it, although lab animals can become addicted to it. Rat studies show this, so perhaps that's true too. And maybe we like our desserts, don't we? But let me indicate too that if a person were to is to drink a 20-ounce soda, 20 ounces of Coca-Cola, it has 15.5 teaspoons of sugar in it, which is simply in the formula for the Coca-Cola. Pepsi has 16.5 teaspoons and 250 calories. So we're getting a good sugar load in the large size of either Coke or Pepsi. And that's one reason why, again, we may not may not want to indulge, or else go to the diet type. Now, the diet types are, of course, 0 calories, and they use sugar substitutes instead. And sugar substitutes, there are a number of them that have been approved and are on the market and are good to be used as such. The best ones are Advantame, which is, I think it's probably not even used yet, according to my little chart here too. And then Splenda, Truvia, Equal Naturals, and Neotame, and Stevia. And the ones that are safe in moderation are said to be things like mannitol, sorbitol, xylitol, which are really alcohols, sugar alcohols. And then there are isomalt, 1 or 2 others too. And there are some that are said to be cautionary. The ones that should be avoided, we are told, are Equal Original, Equal Spoonful, NutraSweet, Saccharin, and Sucralose, which is Splenda. So, I don't know. There are a lot of different types of sugar substitutes on the market. I think that we don't know everything about what the reactions are, how humans react to each of those. And again, I think we're maybe talking about individual reactions in many cases as well. I want to say just a little bit about tea. Tea, iced tea, hot tea. All types of tea come from the very same kind of a plant. It's called Camellia sinensis. Camellia sinensis. And this has its name apparently because it's a relative of the camellia flower, as we know it, flower too. Herbal teas, of course, come from herbs themselves. They are not from the same source, not from the tea plant too. But the teas that we're most familiar with, of course, are black tea and green tea and oolong and pekoe, and all of those come from a tea plant. There's one plant. There's several different types of teas that come from it too. Pekoe is the young beef leaf buds from the plant, and the black and the green and the oolong are from leaves that are treated in various kinds of ways to make them come out the kinds of color or the type that they are too. Tea, it does contain some caffeine, not as much as coffee, but it has some, and some another stimulant called theobromine too. So it has other active compounds as well. Tea is considered to be good for us because it, like coffee, has compounds in it that apparently work well with the rest of the metabolism as it functions. And fine to drink tea. Again, to watch the sugar intake, I guess we would say. Now, I mentioned earlier in regard to the microbiome, the bacteria and other microorganisms that exist, that probiotics go along with the idea of bacteria in the intestinal tract too. Probiotics are referred to as live, active microorganisms that help the intestinal health. They help to boost the activity of the other microorganisms, apparently. They boost and work with them from the sounds of it. It helps both of them to become more active too. So probiotics are said to do some really good things for us, to treat and prevent immune disorders, neurological and infectious diseases, and other kinds of metabolic conditions as well too. So probiotics right now come in different types of forms too. You can buy them in pills and capsules, and as well as in foods. In fact, they come in a number of foods that we're familiar with, some that we aren't quite so familiar with, but they are in fermented foods for one thing. This is where they're fermented because there are microorganisms present that cause the fermentation to take place, like in yogurt and sauerkraut and sourdough bread, fermented cheese, kefir, kimchi, all of those things too. It's said that actual proof of all the good things that are claimed for probiotics may not really have been proven just yet too. There's a lot of interest in them. They haven't been subjected to very rigorous testing, I guess we would say. And maybe they do good things for us. We like our yogurt. Some people like other things like sauerkraut, cheese, kefir, so on. So, but they're a way of life. We have them with us for sure. Let's see. Did you know that most vitamins have a lot of different forms? They aren't just a substance. They're not just a vitamin. For instance, if we take vitamin A, it comes in forms that refer to the eye. Vitamin A, one of the most important function of vitamin A is health of the eye and to help prevent blindness. So some of the forms of it are retinal, retinol, retinoic acid, and retinyl esters. And there are some others as well too. And then there are the carotenoids. And the carotenoids are pre-vitamin A, and they actually act as precursors. They cause the formation of keratin and cryptoxanthin, but the keratins are related then to vitamin A. There are hundreds of keratins as well. What we don't know is what the functions of many of these other forms of the vitamins are. In regard to vitamin A, we know more than most of the others, literally. But most of the vitamins do have several different forms. They will come in what's referred to sometimes as an aldehyde form or an alcohol form, and that's the ending of these words are really refer to that in some way, or in an acid form. But what the functions of all of those are, we don't really know. But I thought I would mention the fact that sometimes you see terms that are unfamiliar, but they really do refer to one of the particular vitamins as we do know it too. I wanted to mention a little bit about some of the most recent Alzheimer's research. There is a really good series of articles in Scientific American. I'm going to hold this up. Am I holding it okay? I hope you can see it. Scientific American. 5 different articles that refer to some of the ongoing research. Of course, Alzheimer's, as of yet, is that type of a disease condition for which there is no cure. It can be delayed. That is, symptoms can be delayed, and it can be prevented to some degree. Not completely, but these articles are so interesting because they talk about the fact that there is for instance, a connection between, this is in regard to when more women get Alzheimer's than men. Now, that's one of the things that again, researchers are unsure as to why women would get them for. But one of these articles talks about the fact that menopause is a time when the bodily changes take place, and it's a time that seems to be when Alzheimer's may actually get a toehold, may begin. And it probably has to do with estrogen in some way. But again, the research is way too new. It's not something that can be said with surety just yet too. But that means that there's a 20-year window between, for instance, usually aged around 50 up to age 70, when, or 70 or a little later, when Alzheimer's, some of the symptoms begin to show. There's this 20-year window in which they're saying it's a time that women can do some things to maybe help prevent the onset of Alzheimer's, which is really, really interesting to realize that, in fact, there are things that we can do too. Things like following a plant-based diet. Isn't that interesting? We keep coming back to this plant-based diet idea. And in fact, I want to say a little bit more about that just yet too. But a dietary intake low in sugar, low in fats and saturated fats, physical exercise, stress reduction, sleep minimum of at least 7 hours. Sleep helps to clear out the harmful protein toxins in the brain. They talk about amyloid and tau proteins that form in the brain, and in fact, they are what are found to be in much greater numbers than in a normal brain. In Alzheimer's brains, many times these are the ones that show up. And so they're saying that now they're trying to come up with, researchers are trying to develop ways to clear out amyloid and tau proteins when they first begin to form, so that they don't have a chance to grow and become so numerous in the brain that they actually lead to full-blown Alzheimer's too. So another article, interesting article, talks about air pollution, and they're saying that even air pollution can be a cause of Alzheimer's. I think they have yet to determine how some of these things actually do occur. It's just known that they do occur, and they find the results of them in post-mortem types of brain tissue, of course. So I wanted to say a little bit more about plant-based meats. There is a whole industry growing up now around developing meats from plants, from plant sources. And there is a particular kind of a burger recipe, plant called, what do they call this thing? Plant, excuse me. Impossible Burger, developed by Silicon Valley, as a matter of fact, too, or in Silicon Valley too. And the recipe for this plant-based burger called Impossible Burger, they use muscle tissue that comes from wheat and potato proteins. They use connective tissue that comes from soybean and wheat gluten. They use fat from coconut oil, and they make heme, the red coloring in the hamburger meat, from that's used as hemoglobin, from soy that's put into yeast, soy grown in yeast, apparently. And then there are other compounds. They say they tested out a number of other compounds just to help out the taste as much as possible. And they found that honeydew was one of those that upped the taste and added apparently just the right touch to come up with this impossible burger. But what I wanted to indicate too, that there are now on the market some 33 kinds of burgers, not burgers, but non-meat items, food items of all kinds too. Some come from well, let's see, Trader Joe's Thai sweet chili, quinoa cowboy, as it's called, ultimate beefiness. There are dozens and dozens of these non-meat products that are now on the market, and many of them are being either tried out or already used, of course, in fast food places. And some of them, I suspect, are good enough that customers are not necessarily aware even that that's what they are. They're not real meat. So I wanted to mention too a real interesting book I have called Cooking, Cooked. Not cooking, cooked, sorry. Cooked. I hope I'm holding it right. By Michael Pollan, who is a very interesting food writer and a prolific food writer. And actually, his books are really, really interesting to read too. But in this book on cooking, he talks about the 4 different kinds of or ways of cooking. And he describes each of those in great detail by showing or telling about his experiences in working with experts in each of these areas. One is cooking by fire, and in that he talks about barbecuing whole pieces of meat, like whole pigs in the South, where they make their barbecue by barbecuing it over a pit of coals for a day or so. And another is by water, which is using water to make stews and soups and such as that in a kettle on the stove or in pans on the stove. Another is by air, and that's by air that's incorporated into bread. Bread, which is, of course, produced by yeast that produce carbon dioxide and cause holes in bread, and because the holes get formed from this gas that's formed, the bread becomes much larger in volume, expands, and he talks in quite a bit of detail about the process of making different kinds of bread and working with one or more experts who taught him how to do that in the right way too. And the last then is earth, and earth had to do with things that are grown in the ground. Where's my little thing? Mushrooms, which really don't require cooking as such, although they can be cooked and are fine when they are cooked. But they would be an example of one, and the other. Can't put my hand on it right at the moment. But just a real interesting read about the ways that we've come to learn about what the advantages are of cooking food. In fact, he makes quite a point of this. He says that with the discovery of fire, that people not only grew and lived longer lives, but their brains even developed. And of course, this would have been back way in the beginning of the time when different groups of people were learning about what they could do to preserve life, I guess. Primitive tribes couldn't even survive without cooking food, he said too. And he made an interesting comment. He said that language and fire are considered by Darwin to be the two most significant achievements of humanity. Language and fire. And maybe we can agree with that too. So those are the main things I wanted to indicate to you. One other area that I've been reading a lot about lately that I think is maybe important in view in light of what we're going through even now, and that is that from many sources we're hearing there are things like war on science. And let me show you this front of this particular issue of the National Geographic. This is about in March 2015, but it talks about the idea that people are skeptical, of course. People want to make up their own minds about what they believe in regard to what they're told and what they hear, and sometimes people develop very skeptical reactions to a lot of the things that come forth too, emotional reactions. There's said to be a number of reasons as to why this might happen, because nowadays the internet is so pervasive, for one thing. And of course, anyone can publish anything on the internet. Do not need to offer proof, do not need to show where it came from or whatever. So there's a lot of iffy and very false information that comes to us through the internet and many of the social media kinds of programs that are offered too. It's said that false information on social media travels 6 times faster than truth and reaches more people, that there is constant change and a fast pace of news, commercialism, skepticism of science, people not educated to sort out the correct information, polarization of opinion. All of those things probably enter into it to some way or another. But we've seen this results of some of all of this, I think, in the fact that in the way that people have reacted to immunizations, to not allowing their children to be vaccinated, also to GMOs, to climate change, to supplements that are on the market, and even to some of the current things that we're hearing nowadays from various sources in regard to the coronavirus. So no one has the perfect answer to this kind of thing too, except that it's best to be aware that there are truths and untruths. And if there's a question about whether something is valid or not, then I think that it's best if we don't take it at outright face value, but question and look further, and try to find trusted sources that we can look to do that too. I wanted to point out one other book. Sorry, I'm doing so much reaching around here. But I wanted to show you Food Politics. This is by Marion Nestle. Marion Nestle is a nutritionist at one of the New York universities, is a prolific author as well, and she talks an awful lot about in this book about how it is that food companies use various lots of different kinds of tactics to influence us to buy their foods. That of course they put the foods on the market and they hope that people will want them. It's not always the case. There are a lot of new food items that are introduced every year on the market. They say some 4,000 to 5,000 even. Most of them not really getting a very good reception, and not a lot of them actually becoming foods that are kept or that stores want to stock and continue to sell. So I'm glad to loan any of these books. I can assure you that the three that I've shown you are interesting reads, and they won't bore you if you want to try them. So just let me know in case that was the case. So pretty much this is what I wanted to say to you and talk about. Just some of the newer things that we're finding out about, some of the things that we already know and some that we don't know as well. So it's hard to have any question and answer session in our current format, but
well, we can still have a question. And let me unmute everybody now, and we'll mute. I'll start with one of the things that touched bases. My husband and I, we cut out all of our carbs out before I started working here, and I weighed 160 pounds. And so we cut out all of our carbs, and one of the things that we really tried to cut out the most of was the sugar. And I think when I started to really lose my weight, Esther, was when you were talking about that sugar and it being an addiction. It was a big addiction for me to give up my ginger ale that was full of sugar. And so I really struggled with that. My husband's fault was always the ice cream. And then the potatoes, you know, I find that potatoes, you know, were bad for me as well. So, and there was one other thing that I really liked about the conversation or about your speech was when you were talking about that stuff's all on the internet. And have you seen that commercial where the girl's sitting there? She goes, "Well, I've got a date with a Paris model." And he comes walking up, and he was no model, and he says, "Bonjour." And he said, "Where'd you meet him?" "On the internet." You can't always trust what the internet says, if I'm correct. It looks like I didn't unmute everybody. Let me unmute everybody so that they can answer questions as well. Okay, I think I have everybody unmuted now. Does anyone have questions for Esther? Or any comments?
I'd like to ask on that book, What to Eat When.
yes.
Did they dwell more on the amount or the calories or the types of food?
No, it's more on it has recipes in it too, and menus, but it's more about the timing of food, eating foods and meals than it is anything else.
Okay, I would like to have that one.
Okay.
Esther,
Yes.
when you were talking about that set point earlier, the point in your diet, through the years, I've probably tried every goofy diet that ever came around. And years back, that was one of them. It was a set point diet, and I don't remember all about it, but a little book, and it had to do with the exercise and the amount of food and the kind of food that you did in order to attempt to change that set point so that you could lose weight. But for a little while, it was all the rage.
Well,
Esther, one thing we added to our diet, there was this guy called Butter Bob, and he said that butter makes your pants fall off. Using like good butter, and adding it to your diet, because it said that the natural butter, not like the margarine, which has the
trans fats. Trans fats.
Trans fats, yes. but adding a really good, healthy, like a real original butter to your diet. And we did. And it actually, like when we added the butter, cut out the sugar, and watched our carbs, like really got rid of the carbs, we really started to lose weight. I mean, I was actually probably about 10 pounds lighter than what I am now. I was at about 124 pounds when it came down to it. So what is your take on that, adding like a butter to your diet? Are you speechless, Esther? Dr. Winterfeldt.
Butter is good in moderation. Butter, real butter is saturated, has saturated fat in it. It's it's much better than oleo margarine, that's for sure. It has over twice as many calories as either protein foods or carb foods. It has 9 calories per gram versus 4 calories per gram for protein and carbohydrate. So you have to watch total intake because it does add calories.
Right.
And it adds some saturated fat. But if you're still fairly young, you're still fairly young.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm talking comparatively.
I'll tell that to my grandchildren. I have 3 of them, you know. I mean, I'm feeling it. I mean, you know, I'm 51. I know I am younger than you guys, but there are times like I really like, there's a lot of times that I'll wake up, I'll know when I haven't eaten right, and I'll get out of bed and like my bones hurt. I mean, y'all see me bebopping around out here, but in reality, I don't exercise probably the way that I should. And I get most of my exercise by walking this campus, but I hurt in the mornings, and I think it has a lot to do with food in our body, what we eat.
Yeah, our food has a lot to do with how we feel, how we function. It really does. More than we probably realize a good bit of the time.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of intermediate fasting?
Intermediate fasting? No, I'm not familiar with that.
My husband did he studied this like crazy, and he talked about if you will cut out 15 hours of eating, usually if you stop eating at a certain point at night and don't eat again until the next morning, at least until after lunchtime, give yourself at least 15 bodies. There's supposed to be this gene that kicks in that actually goes away once we get past our teenage years, and it actually kicks that back in again and causes your body. And my husband's been doing it for quite some time. He's very thin and he feels pretty good, and his hips don't hurt as much as they used to, and his joints aren't as bad.
He sure is due to that, though.
I don't know. I don't do it.
I don't know either. I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't because fasting for more than 7, 8, or 9 or 10 hours is not a good thing, really. You know.
Yeah, it's not good for the body.
No.
Looks like that is.
And
My
you don't
brother-in-law
have.
did it, and he came off of 2 of his diabetic medicines while doing that. I don't know.
Well,
I don't recommend it either. I just was asking if you had heard of it and wanted to know if you had heard anything about it.
well, I know that there are diets, eating plans where people sometimes skip whole days, you know, or sometimes people will eat everything they want and crave or whatever, like on a weekend, and then watch their diet, watch the total calorie intake all the rest of the week. And they say that works fine too. So I don't know.
Doesn't that mess your circadian rhythm up?
Uh-huh.
Doesn't that mess with your circadian rhythm?
It would, unless you developed a new one. Unless you developed a new one, I guess.
Right.
I had a friend who did that thing about not eating anything after 6. He started going to bed at 7. And that's what I
There's no point being up.
He was smart. He was smart.
Well, this has been a really great talk, Esther. We sure appreciate you putting all this together for us and giving us some healthy options to really look at for our lives. It's really important, especially right now when we all really need to try to stay as healthy as possible with the COVID still out there and about. And so I feel like, it's important that we all watch what we're doing and stay healthy, walk and watch what we're eating and make right choices on the menus. And so you bring that to us, and I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I'm very appreciative of it that you take the time to get on here and help us think about our health and help us watch what we need to for our lives to be better.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I like doing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody have a great day. I will be gone tomorrow and Friday. So you'll just have to, if you need something, I will be on tomorrow morning for the Mitch album call, though. I will be doing that from my house. I'll be doing it from there and taking the call because I want to be a part of that. And so I will be hosting that in the morning. So don't forget to jump on. It's going to be a great call, chapter 2 and 3. Bye, you guys.
Thank
Love
you.
you. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you, Esther.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, James, Taylor. Bye, James, as you pop in at the last minute. Bye.
He's a man of few words.
Very few. Bye, guys.